I haven't had the chance to work on that little pronunciation game I was going to do for you, so instead I'm going to set a challenge. I think some of you might be up for this. If you are, listen to what I'm going to read you. It's quite long, but can you find in this passage I'm going to read the names of 10 cities? Simple, isn't it? Haha. We shall see. Are you ready? Our distant ancestors led pretty simple lives. Until around 10,000 BC, all humans were hunter-gatherers and lived a nomadic life, searching endlessly for food. It was the development of agriculture that enabled humans to settle down and live first as farmers and then as villagers. Around 3500 BC, small towns began appearing in Mesopotamia, surrounded by defensive high walls and irrigated fields that fed the town's population. In the 1,000 years that followed, when agriculture had become more of a science and crop fields had risen, fewer people were needed to produce food. People took other jobs, became wealthier, and more chose to live in towns close to shops and markets. This worked well for centuries. Towns flourished, and eventually one of the grandest, Rome, became the world's first city of more than 1 million people, around 100 AD. Although the fertile lands surrounding Rome could have adequately fed the city, the Roman people began importing food and became reliant on long supply chains. When Gaiseric the Vandal began withholding vital North African grain supplies from Rome in 455 AD, the city's power went into steep decline. The Dark Ages that ensued saw people deserting cities across Europe and returning to the countryside. It was not until 1200 AD that people began flocking back to the cities, a trend encouraged by the growth of iron technology and further improvements in agriculture. Cities and towns began to spring up across Europe and Asia. The main factor which determined where a city was founded, according to Derek Keane, director of the Centre for Metropolitan History at University of London's Institute of Historical Research, was simple geography. Was it accessible to people who wished to trade there or bring in supplies? However, there were other important considerations. A city might be successfully founded in a desert if there was a need for a staging post or an interchange on a trade route, he says. Then there were the simple demands of a ruler's ego, or a need to defend people against invaders. Finally, there was one major motivating force: religion. A sacred site attracts many visitors who require service, Keane says. In medieval times, cities grew up to exploit trade routes. Bruges in Belgium became rich by weaving wool from Britain. Florence too prospered from its wool industry until banking came to dominate its economy. Constantinople became by far Europe's biggest city and premier trading centre, the true heir to the Roman legacy during the Middle Ages. The gateway between the Eastern Mediterranean, India and Africa on one side and Europe on the other, Constantinople played a crucial role in the trade of Eastern riches for Western wool and heavy iron products. At the same time, Venice was prospering thanks to trade, its proximity to the sea, Africa, and the treasures of Persia. The city-state traded luxury goods such as precious stones, spices, silks, and ivory. The lure of trading riches has encouraged the growth of cities in unlikely locations. When the East India Trading Company needed a base with good access to the Ganges Valley, it founded Calcutta on swampland. The site was the furthest inland point that could be reached by ocean-going ships, and the city has grown to a population of 15.5 million today. The most ludicrously located city has to be St. Petersburg, built as the capital of a vast empire by Peter the Great. Thousands of slave laborers died during its construction, and he had to force people to live there. Other major world capitals had no such problems. London, founded in 50 AD, grew steadily and is the least planned city in the world, with snobbery playing a large part in determining its layout. Mainline stations are dotted around the periphery of inner London, as wealthy 19th century residents refused construction of a giant central London rail terminal. By the 1930s, US architect Frank Lloyd Wright was arguing that city size should be limited. But as Wright's treatise was published, New York was becoming the world's first city with a population of 10 million, and cities have since grown at an astonishing rate. Mexico City is home to 16.5 million people, and 26.9 million now live in Tokyo. I hope you were able to follow that. It's quite a long passage, and I stuttered a little bit from time to time, but as I said, there are 10 cities mentioned in there, and if you fancy a challenge, if you're up for it, have a listen. Let me know what you think. Can you hear 10 cities mentioned? Bye for now.